Well, it's hard to believe that it's been over half a year since Mark Carney parachuted in from the European Union and became our Prime Minister. But here we are. And he still doesn't feel that Canadians deserve a budget. But the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report is out and the results are damning. Justin Trudeau was projected to have our national debt at $131 billion in 4 years' time. And this is the reason that Canadians lost a lot of trust in him and we ended up in this position to begin with. But that pales in comparison to Mark Carney's projections at $255 billion. Now, some Canadians are starting to wake up and see that these people are very incompetent, to say the least. But I would argue that it's worse than that. I would argue that they are not incompetent at all, and they know exactly what they are doing. Meet Mark Carney, economic hitman. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, smash the like button, and leave a comment down below. Now, if you've never heard of the term economic hitman, then I highly suggest you read this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. So if you haven't read the book, the TLDR is John Perkins was once a chief economist at a Boston strategic consulting firm, where he has admitted and gone on record that over the years he was instrumental in helping U.S. intelligence agencies and multinational corporations essentially blackmail third world countries and their leaders into taking out massive loans from the World Bank and the IMF. And these loans would be used to fund infrastructure projects in these developing countries that they would never have any hopes of paying back. Does any of this sound familiar? Now, if you want to go down the rabbit hole on John Perkins, there's plenty out there on the internet. He's done TED Talks and podcasts, and it's all very interesting, so I suggest you check it out. But this clip really summarizes it.
We will identify a third world country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. But the money never goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects, power plants, highways, industrial parks, things that benefit a few very rich people in that country, as well as our own corporations, but don't help the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity, don't have the skills to get jobs in industrial parks, don't own cars to drive on the highways. And yet those very people, the whole country is left holding a huge debt so that it can't pay for education and social services and health care for its people. In fact, the debt is so huge by intent that at some point we economic hitmen go back and we say, listen, you owe us a lot of money. You can't repay your debts, so sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies without regard to the environment. Vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote. Send troops in support of ours to some place in the world like Iraq.
Or Ukraine.
And in that way, we've created this empire.
Now, to me, what you just saw is the embodiment of the absolute worst of crony capitalism. And although their methodology is very different, I'm starting to see some similarities between John Perkins and Mark Carney. Now, if you guys can remember under Justin Trudeau, Carney was known for behind the scenes pushing net zero initiatives and infrastructure projects that quite clearly he stood to benefit from. And you might remember this moment when Pierre Poilievre called him out on this.
Do you support the Prime Minister's decision to veto the Northern Gateway pipeline, Mr. Carney?
I understand the veto of the Northern Gateway pipeline.
Do you support it?
Given both environmental and commercial reasons.
Do you support it?
I think it was sensible. I wasn't involved in the decision, but I think it was the right decision.
And yet your company has invested billions of dollars in oil companies in both Brazil and the UAE to buy pipelines. You bought billions of dollars of pipelines as a company in the last 5 years. Do you support those investments?
Mr. Poilievre, there is a global energy system, and one of the issues, I'm trying to explain a bit of how the economy works. One of the
Thank
issues,
you so much.
It may help. One of the issues for this committee in thinking about a sustainable transition.
Do you support it?
Where is Canada's role in those in those as energy transitions from fossil fuels to renewables. And in different jurisdictions, into different geography, it matters. It matters, and this is a fundamental point.
Yeah.
No, I'm
so
sorry. This is
what you're saying is you oppose pipelines in Canada, but you support them in the UAE and in Brazil. That's what you've actually said.
There are specific.
That's your double standard.
It is not a double standard.
It is a double standard.
No, it's not.
You make billions of dollars off foreign pipelines, and you shut them down here at home, putting our people out of work.
So that was Mark Carney, rightfully being called out on actively preventing us from developing our own oil and gas sector while simultaneously profiting off the exact same thing in other countries. Now, this, of course, was to protect us from the climate crisis. And now, all of a sudden, that doesn't seem to matter anymore, right? Because we have a new crisis. If there's one thing about Mark Carney, you'll notice he always needs a crisis to justify what he is doing. And this clip from his appearance at the Council on Foreign Relations is pretty telling. So I want to get into this one.
Been so reliant on the U.S. economy, been so integrated. How much can you reorient the Canadian economy, both to be more east-west than north-south, or to be more integrated with other economies than the U.S., given the long history there?
The answer to the question starts with recognizing the need to do it. One thing I'd impress upon the audience is that Canadians understand the need to, as we put it, to be masters in our own house. The country does not want to wake up and look on, all due respect, on Truth Social or X to see what the latest change is in U.S. policy, but wants to get on with what we can control. And that's a big part of the government strategy. So getting rid of barriers east-west, as you put it, barriers across the provinces, that alone, if it's fully done, we've done the federal part, but if all our provinces reduce their barriers,
Now, who put up those trade barriers in the first place, Mark Carney? And notice what he's doing here when he mentions the provinces. Now, he's claiming that they have done their part on the federal level, but they're going to use their pawns in the provinces to actively block these infrastructure and oil and gas developments. Just look at what's going on with David Eby right now and Alberta.
the estimates are that is a bigger return to the Canadian economy than the worst case trade outcome with the U.S. And candidly, we've been done a favor because we should have been, all of these things we could have done before ourselves. So we needed the rupture, we needed the shock, it seems, in order to do them. But there is a very strong consensus in the country to do that.
Man, you gotta hand it to Carney for giving up the game in such a spectacular way. He just admits out loud that we could have been doing these things ourselves the entire time. And what's this about us needing the rupture? Well, who needed it, Mark? Did the Canadian people need a trade war with our closest economic and military ally? Has he really done everything he could to prevent this situation, or is he benefiting from it? Ryan Gerritsen put this one out. This is regarding Mark Carney's blind trust, which Carney knows exactly what investments are in it. Canada is at risk of entering a massive conflict of interest scenario.
Mark Carney's Liberal government has made or will make public policy decisions that will impact the success of the holdings in these funds. Canada is at risk of entering a massive conflict of interest scenario, correct?
Canada's policymaking process, yes, because of the central role of the Prime Minister, who is the boss over all policymaking processes in the end.
So, Mr. Conacher, shouldn't the Prime Minister be absolutely required to disclose the assets that exist within these funds?
Yes, there should be full disclosure, but it doesn't. It adds a bit of transparency, but it doesn't resolve the conflict of interest. Transparency is transparency, and removing a conflict of interest is removing a conflict of interest. The one does not do the other. This
is all very concerning, because Mark Carney is well on his way to bankrupting this country, and he's not exactly being forthright on these mystery investments. Michael Cooper says Carney must come clean. Carney had secret meetings with global investors in New York City and London, but refuses to reveal who he met with.
Recently, the Prime Minister, our jet-setting Prime Minister, in his trips to New York City and London, England, met with several prominent business as well as investment leaders. When he was asked on the weekend who he met with, the Prime Minister refused to say. He refused to be transparent. He merely said he met with, quote, investment-type investors, close quote. Quote, people who have global capital, close quote. And then he said, we'll need significant capital in respect of certain unnamed and unspecified projects. Now, we know that there has never been a prime minister with more potential conflicts of interest than this prime minister. We have never had a prime minister with an ethics screen as vast as the one that is imposed on this prime minister in light of those multitude of potential conflicts of interest. And we know that this so-called ethics screen has no mechanisms to ensure that there are checks and balances to see that it in fact is being triggered when it ought to be. Instead, we are left to simply trust the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff and the Clerk of the Privy Council, who serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and answer to the Prime Minister, and who are therefore not independent. That simply isn't good enough to simply say we're going to trust them. Because, frankly, we don't know whether the ethics screen should have been triggered. We don't know if what was discussed, whether the Prime Minister stands in any way to personally benefit from any discussions, any decisions that might be in the process of being made arising from the discussions that he had in London and New York. And we know that despite the fact that the Prime Minister is subject to this ethics screen, he may make decisions that he stands to personally benefit from. I say at the very least, well, that's unacceptable, and there needs to be, in the face of that, at the very least, some level of transparency. Canadians deserve to know who the Prime Minister is meeting with, why he was meeting with them, and they need to have the assurance that this very flimsy ethics screen is, at the very least, being triggered when it ought to be.
Mark Carney has already said that these mystery investors, which we know nothing about, will require a huge amount of capital, to the point that it is clearly going to put our grandchildren and great-grandchildren into historic levels of debt. So if it comes out in this ethics screen that Mark Carney is financially tied with these people, then I think it's safe to say that my title of economic hitman is pretty apt. But I want to know what you guys think down in the comments. Let me know. And as always, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Johnny from Nova Scotia says thank you. Hey, Johnny from Nouvelle-Écosse, il dit merci, thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Yeah, come on.